Good Monday, everybody. How are you? I am Berm. That is Bill. This is the Monday Rewatch, where we talk about what we saw on Saturday before anyone makes the comment. Yes, I'm at Austin's house. We just got back from our trip to Happy Valley. I still have to stay in town for another day because on Monday, as per usual, it's time for Roosters, and we'll be there at 11:30 later this morning. So if you're in town and want to join us, that's where you'll find us in the back segment of the restaurant, Roosters on Old Tangy. But for now, we're talking about Ohio State and Penn State, a game that upon rewatch, Bill, for me, the first question I have is, why did Ohio State let it get to that point? But also then, how the hell did they win?
Great questions. How did they let it get to that point? Let me tell you about a play called the bubble screen and how it didn't work. Every time they tried to run it, it felt like not only did it not work, it was like just shooting themselves in the foot every time. Like it killed drives, particularly one down in the end zone or down in the red zone, excuse me. But it was like evident all along, I thought, even like from the jump, what was going to work in that game. It just took some time, I think, for Ohio State to really like lean into that stuff, and that's throwing the ball over the middle of the field, and frankly, even running the ball in the middle of the field too. I know, I've read some stuff and heard some stuff like, oh, their interior blocking isn't good, and like I'm not saying that every interior run was blocked well, but the couple of times that TreVeyon Henderson did get more than like 4 yards on a carry, I felt like it was on the inside. So it's just like they were very perimeter oriented and Penn State was ready for it. But when Ohio State went away from that, it worked like a charm and they looked like the Ohio State offense. So like that's probably the best way to sum it up.
Yeah, I'm not like the guy who knows everything about football. I don't have a hugely like advanced football pedigree or IQ, but Saturday on the pregame show, my first thought was you can't allow tackles for loss to happen against Penn State. The Buckeyes allowed 7 of them. That's too many. What's interesting about that is that only 1.5 of them were from defensive linemen or linebackers. So it was clearly the defensive backs of Penn State doing the work, coming down, and all of that essentially was on that bubble screen that you talked about. Beyond that, first thing I said on Saturday after the game was that I felt like Ohio State sort of hamstrung itself, and it took the keys out of CJ Stroud's hands at points in the game where, had they just let him have the keys, the game could have gotten out of hand very early, and a lot of this other stuff wouldn't have happened. I still feel that way, and I think you could tell from the very first series of the game that Stroud was feeling it. Like he came out and he made the first on the second down play, he threw it to Marvin and barely missed him. And then he went, or on the first down play, threw it to Marvin and barely missed him. Went back to him on third down. And that was one of those plays where we've talked about him getting better at certain things throughout the year. The pocket was collapsing on him on that play, on third play of the game. It's 3rd and 10. Pocket's collapsing. He's got guys getting pushed into his face from his offensive line. He doesn't get hit, but he can't step into the throw. He couldn't really follow through on the throw and puts it 30 yards down the field exactly where it has to be. And at that moment, you're like, okay, this is going to be one of those days for him. And then Ohio State just sort of clunkily went along from there, and I didn't really understand it.
Yeah, I thought CJ was in a pretty good place from the start as well. He didn't make every single throw. He threw behind Emeka on one play. He overshot Marvin a little bit on that ball on the sideline, but I still think that was probably more about Marvin, who I think had just gotten the wind knocked out of him, not quite being able to run the way that they're used to with their timing, more than it was CJ missing a throw, because I thought the ball was in a pretty good spot. But I thought, he was locked in. What do you have? 5 incomplete passes, 6 incomplete passes?
27 to 33.
Yeah,
26 to 33.
26 33 maybe. Yeah, so 7 incomplete passes. That's pretty dialed in. Again, and I guess part of that is buoyed by just chucking out bubble screens that go for no gain. But even if you remove those, it's still a pretty efficient day for him. And you're right. I don't know what it was. I don't know if they were, it at times felt like they were expecting maybe more pressure than they actually got. Penn State did not blitz them a ton. I looked it up. Pro Football Focus has it as a 32% blitz rate, which is not, all that high. Penn State, I think, has blitzed Ohio State more than that, much more than that in the past. And maybe that's where some of those bubbles come in, or the one play to TreVeyon Henderson where like they threw a screen, but Penn State only sent 4 people and there were just like 5 defenders waiting there to tackle TreVeyon Henderson because it wasn't
no blockers.
No blockers, yeah. So I think there were some mix-ups there, but CJ was really good. in this game. And I agree with you. If they would have handed it to him from the jump, and even if it meant he had to throw the ball 50 times in that game, I think they would have probably, at least they would have put up a much bigger number in the first half, and it would have looked more efficient.
Yeah, I think that, there's going to be some obvious discussion about the play with 6 seconds to go and understanding you got to get rid of that ball, but that decision was something that people will probably criticize a little bit. I thought really other than that, the only decision he made all day that was sort of bad in my opinion was with like 4 minutes to go in the first half, he scrambled and was rolling out, had to do that escape move he's been doing, and he threw it to the sideline in a way that like Penn State should have intercepted the ball if you were playing, and that would have cost Ohio State 3 points there. So you just got to throw that completely out of bounds. But other than that, I mean, I thought he played pretty close to perfect and did the things he had to do. And that's what I wrote about on Sunday at OhioState.com or OhioStateRivals.com. Like he did what he needed to do. And what I really liked is that he saw the opportunity to step up and make some plays in the running game. And even though they weren't huge plays, he had, on the touchdown, they had the third and 18 on that drive at the end of the half. And he scrambled for 11 yards to get them into the position to go for it on 4th and 7, where he connected with Marvin again. So, like, I hope that he had the value of that, because that is exactly what type of scrambling he should be doing.
I thought that was great. Like honestly, maybe the most promising thing from the entire game was CJ scrambling the few times that he did. Maybe it got lost in the grand scheme of things because it was a weird game and there were a lot of fireworks late. But I thought that was really great to see. The end of half play was interesting to me because Ryan Day afterward said like, oh, like I wanted CJ to throw the fade, but then CJ like didn't even work to that side. He worked opposite the fade ball to Marvin to like a 3 receiver side where it looked like everyone was running in breaking routes. It was just like a total botch job, I think, by everybody. Yeah. So like I put some blame on CJ, sure, but
Penn State blitzed on both sides. Travion Henderson picked it up on the one side. Johnny Dixon, the safety for Penn State, was completely unblocked on the other. Like, you just have to know in that situation. Like, you have 1 second to throw the ball. If you don't get it off in that 1 second, you throw it out of the back of the end zone.
Yeah, and I wonder if there was Ryan Day didn't know how many timeouts they had, and maybe CJ didn't know how many timeouts they had. So just like poor execution across the board. But I'm glad you mentioned the 4th and 7 that was converted on that drive. I know that drive didn't end in points, but I thought that play was like maybe one of the best examples of what makes Marvin Harrison so good, because he's not. I don't think we talk enough about how smart he is. Like, we just talk about like, look at his physical profile. He's really skilled, but like on that play, he had gotten them a couple of times on in breaking routes, and they gave him a little cushion on 4th and 7. But that cornerback was playing with inside leverage, like they were waiting for him to run that slant, and they brought a blitz. And Marvin and CJ both like sight adjusted that route. He broke in much sooner than he should have. He caught the ball probably thinking he was going to get rocked by that cornerback, and got it like 2 steps over the down marker to convert that 4th and 7. Like, that is a really, really heady play from a sophomore. That's a good indicator that Marvin Harrison is more than just a guy who's going to go up and do acrobatic stuff when you throw him 50-50 balls. Like, there's a lot of football IQ in there too. And he did it later in the game too on a 3rd and 10 that they converted.
Well, what's interesting about that 4th and 7 is what you're talking about with CJ. CJ saw that guy jumping the route and threw the ball almost at his feet, and so Marvin had to go down and get it. And it's that sort of trust and that sort of, like, these guys have computers in their brains, and they're seeing so many things happening so quickly, and to adjust like that is insane. I want to ask, before we move through the game here a little bit, first quarter, this is a philosophy decision, and I wonder about. In either A, Ryan Day was unaware of the play clock the same way that CJ Stroud was, or B, he decided to just take a 5-yard delay game penalty when it was 3rd down and 10, second drive of the game. Ohio State just intercepts the ball, and is in a position to go up 2 scores or score again after the Zach Harris interception. It's 3rd and 10. The Buckeyes are at their own 30-yard line, or the Penn State 30-yard line. They take a 5-yard delay of game penalty instead of calling a timeout. And if you're Ryan Day there, do you not feel like you have to take the timeout? And I know it's 12 minutes and 50 seconds in the first quarter, but then you end up missing a 54-yard field goal. And I just wonder, why someone on the sideline isn't like, hey, we should probably take a timeout. Like in a game like that, don't you think you just have one guy watching the play clock the whole time?
You would think so. Like they were in that position a couple of times, like a lot, where it was running down, and maybe it should have had like one or two more delay game penalties. But it's more puzzling too, given that it was last week. I asked after the Iowa game, I asked Ryan Day about a bunch of timeouts he burned in the first half down in the red zone, and he's like, "Well, I'll call them whenever I want to call them in the first half because I don't deem first half timeouts as being all that important. And if I feel like I need to call them to make sure we're in the right play, even when it might not make sense, I'll do it." And I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. It's not the second half; they're not as important. But then he didn't do it in that situation, which doesn't make that was the if you that's how you view timeouts in the first half. That would have been the opportune time to call one, rather than put your offense in 3rd and 15 and then try to kick a career-long field goal for a guy who doesn't, like, I don't think has the leg to make that kind of field goal. So, just like throw it on the pile of things that were sort of puzzling game management decisions, especially in the first half.
Yeah, I felt like Ohio State had an opportunity, and I already said it, in this episode, but I felt like they had an opportunity to put this game away in the first quarter and just didn't do it. And when all week we talked about it, you and I especially, because we're the only two that believed that Penn State had a chance to win this game. Like you could not let the Penn State crowd get into this game. And after the first interception by Sean Clifford, if Ohio State goes down and scores there, even if they make a 40-yard field goal to go up 6-0, and then you get the second interception, and then you score the Mayan Williams touchdown later, like the game's over. The game is over at that point. Instead, you miss the field goal, then you just kind of let them hang around. And I just didn't really understand a lot of what it is. And this is one of those moments where maybe I'll sound homerish or whatever, but I think we forget at times that Ryan Day is only in his fourth year of being a head coach anywhere, because there are things to learn about handling in-game adjustments and clock management. And you just figure at a place like that, knowing that taking the crowd out of it was a major like goal, that they really let Penn State hang around by some puzzling decisions.
They did. I thought so their first touchdown drive was like, here's the Ohio State offense. It was like 3 plays. It was a minute and 30 seconds. They used a little bit of tempo. Like I thought they could have used more tempo in this game. I maybe that's hard on the road when it's that loud, but and I get that communicating things can be exceedingly difficult when you're playing in that kind of environment. But I also think too that tempo takes the crowd out of it. Like just like the defense, they don't have time to catch up to what's happening if you're snapping the ball quickly. And the times in this game where I thought the offense looked at its best, they were going fast. They were throwing the ball a lot in those situations too. But even the run game worked. Like the later 3-play scoring drive too, they used a lot of tempo. And Trevion Henderson scored from 41 yards out. Like Penn State couldn't get set. Ohio State, I thought, seemed like it had a clear vision. The offensive players had a clear vision of what they were trying to execute on those plays. It wasn't anything overly complicated. They were just going fast and not outthinking themselves. And I thought they could have leaned into that much more in this game, especially early on. And maybe it could have been a much better game going into halftime, or a much different game going into halftime.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of notes again. I mean, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised at how many notes I have, to be honest. But you go into the second quarter leading 10-0. You have a 3rd and 2 at your own 28-yard line. You bring in your big package. You have everyone lined up on the left side of the offensive line, again, to the short side of the field, to the boundary. And everyone knows it's coming. And you run right into it. You lose a yard and you have to punt.
Mm-hmm.
That play, aside from the obvious fact and something you've talked about ad nauseum recently, it's very predictable. But it's one of those moments where you see, or you begin to understand the questions about maybe Trevion Henderson's not seeing the field the way that he did a year ago, or the way that people would expect him to. Because if he just makes one cut to the outside, to the right, and goes to the field side, he probably runs for 70 yards on a touchdown. But it's poorly blocked, and then you have the running back missing a cutback, and you start to wonder, okay, what are we doing with this play call? Because it's the same thing over and over.
Yeah, I think they have it's not an issue, but I think it's an interesting position they find themselves in, where Mayan Williams' strengths, I think, suit a little more what they want to be as a running team, and a lot of these zone running plays gives the running back options, and honestly, I think puts a lot on their plate to determine where exactly they're supposed to go. And that is not Trevion Henderson's strong suit. It's just like he does a lot of things really well. I just don't think vision is one of them, or at least it's not this year. And I don't know if that's a matter of some of the stuff that Austin's talked about, where guys press when they're in a shared workload and they're trying to hit the home run every time. I don't know where that comes from, but I just don't think he's seeing things all that well, juxtaposed to some of the more like gap schemes where there's a specific aiming point on this play. The ball is designed to go here. Trevion hits it and he scores a 41-yard touchdown. He scored a 7-yard touchdown later in the game. I think they need to call more of those things for Trevion to help him out. I'm not taking it off his plate, because I think you're right. I think some of these negative runs, sometimes we maybe put too much on the offensive line and not enough on the decisions that the running backs make. I think both kind of go hand in hand, but I think the offensive line and the running backs both can be helped by more diversity of play calls, and not just, lining up in a formation where I and everyone else in the press box and people in the stadium who've watched Ohio State play more than like 2 or 3 games can tell you where the ball is going to go. It's just sometimes you can't out athlete teams to the edge, and Penn State's one of those teams. And unfortunately for Ohio State, they leaned into that a little too much.
Yeah, and I don't want to poo-poo on Trey that much. I mean, I thought, in one of my notes here is the 40-some-yard touchdown run, however long it was, he looked like Trey of last year. That speed,
He did.
That was as quick a burst as we've seen out of Trey Henderson all season. The 7-yard touchdown run a couple series later was a guy who saw exactly where he needed to go, as you just alluded to, and that was a gap scheme, that we talked about. They pulled Mitch Rossi, or had Rossi as the lead blocker, and they pulled Matt Jones to clean it up, and untouched for 7 yards. Untouched for 7 yards inside the red zone is not easy to do. So I think you need to give credit where credit's due. I think that we're heading into an unknown situation here now with Mayan Williams and his injury situation. We don't know if it's going to be a couple weeks or the end of the season for him at this point. And so Trevion Henderson, for Ohio State to reach their ultimate goals, is going to need to be the best version of Trevion Henderson. And I think part of it is Ohio State needing to find ways to diversify things with the play calling. Part of it is him just having to step up and make a play to outdo one guy when it's his time. But ultimately, I don't want to knock him too much, because I don't think it's a running back issue. I don't think it's an offensive line issue. I thought Matt Jones, I think, struggled pretty much for the second straight week. We've talked about that already. I don't want to lament it too much, because again, it's a 44-31 win, and you think, hey, that's great. But we're rewatching. Speaking of Noah Ruggles, because we are, I wonder if there's a lingering issue or health issue for him, because he does not seem to be driving through the ball on the field goals. And that 54-yarder he made, he had last year some opportunities to make longer field goals, and he looked a lot stronger kicking them than he did on Saturday. And I know you and Austin was arguing with me on the drive back to the hotel that it wouldn't have been good even if it was straight. But rewatching the game, it definitely would have been good if it was straight. It just wasn't.
It was a little, it was deeper than I thought.
It would have barely made it over the goalpost, but the crossbar. But it certainly was just never had a chance. But what do you got? What do you want to talk about? That's your turn.
Let's see. What do I want to talk about? JTT. Sorry, he doesn't like being called that. JT Tuimoloau.
At this point, he gets after that game on Saturday, Jalen gets to decide what we call him from here on out, for sure.
Yeah. Just like I'm a little mesmerized by the way that he's able to move for a gentleman of his size. And I know we talked about the play where he dropped out and made the pick, his first interception on snap judgments, but I did not have that good of an appreciation for his second interception. And
it looked easy, but it was not.
It was not like too. So he rushes around the edge, and that right tackle, poor guy, had a long day, shoots to get his block off, and JT just goes, nope, swipes his hands away, but then like all in one motion is moving forward full speed, is swiping that guy's hands away, and then exploding up to snatch a ball out of the air, and then just waltzes in the end zone. It's like, that is not normal. Like, I like these guys who make things that are like otherworldly athletic achievements just look exceedingly normal. And we're just like, oh yeah, he did that, no problem. Like that was a freaky play that JT made, and he made a few of them in that game.
It looked like he was like playing Dance Dance Revolution or something, because it was like one move down, one move up. It was like he was doing like auditioning for the next Thriller video or something. But what you see out of him, we've talked about him most of the year, is how he's been close and close and close. And Ryan Day talked about it post game, so I'm not going to belabor that. But the difference in his natural athleticism versus, let's say, Zach Harrison, who obviously Zach Harrison is a freak when it comes to straight line speed. We saw it. I mean, there was one play where he chased down Sean Clifford on a 3rd and 10 where Clifford was trying to scramble for a first down in the fourth quarter. Play. Where you see what Zach, that's where you start to be like, oh boy, that guy can do some things. But we're not talking about Zach right now. But the difference is JT's ability to bend and get low and to do the things that he does is so much different than most guys. And I know that he's being compared to the Bosa's and Chase Young, same way Zach has been. They're different players, of course, but Chase and JT are more athletically similar than maybe we would assume based on the fact that I think everyone thought that JT, when he got to college, was going to be a 3-tech, and he's out there playing like a wide 9 and then, running through offensive tackles, running around them. The first interception that he made, which, again, even if it's just like dropping into coverage, reading, diving, but he dove and he's 2 feet off the ground, bobbles the ball, like flips it over to himself. It's an insane thing to do. And to think about a 20-year-old at 6'5", 275 pounds doing that, it is abnormal. And I'm glad that the nation had an opportunity to finally be woken up to this type of year he's had, because the stats haven't indicated it.
Yeah, he's really strong too. On top of all that, the strip sack, he just I was like, oh, what technique did he use? I think the technique was, I'm stronger than you. And he just threw the guy backwards and then poked the ball out.
One of my notes is on that play reminded me of Bosa in 2014, where he just pushed a guy into the quarterback. This is essentially what happened, except when Bosa did it, it was a running back. He took the right tackle and shoved him into the quarterback, and then while shoving him into the quarterback with one hand, swiped down with the other and knocked the ball out. It's a remarkable game by JT Tuimoloau if you just watch it and see what he did from the very start to the very finish. It was incredible.
Yeah, he played really well. I thought it was a really good game for Tyleik Williams. Maybe his best of the year. Showed up in the run game, had that big stop on 4th and 2. I think he's always been pretty good in the pass game. But my thing with him is always what can you give consistently when you're playing tackle against the run and short yardage, that kind of stuff. I think sometimes he gets taken out of the play a little too much for a guy that's as big as he is. But that did not happen, or at least didn't happen to the point where I noticed it. I thought that this was one of the better games he's played.
Well, it's one of those situations where we're talking about how do you handle a play if everyone knows what's coming. Penn State on a previous 3rd down and 2 had run the that T formation that they were doing on that drive, and they ran it and picked up the first down. The next time they ran it was on the 4th and 1 back at the Ohio State 19, and that's when Tyleik jumps in and cuts it off and makes the play. And then again, Penn State runs that on the 4th and goal from the 1-foot line that they score a touchdown on. Eichenberg saw the exact same thing and cut through. And I mean, Ohio State understood what the assignment was, and both times you see the difference between Tyleik coming through and making the play and stopping it, and Tommy coming through and making a great play to get back there, but didn't finish it, and it led to a touchdown. For a guy that had 15 tackles and has been great all year, I thought this was the first time Eichenberg looked a little tentative. I don't know if he was just not feeling quite as comfortable. Penn State has a lot of good athletes, and they move guys around a lot, and I don't know if it was just some of that, but ultimately,
I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
So one of the things I have down here, I wrote tackling in all capital letters. They had too many missed tackles, but I think part of that is the kind of player they were trying to tackle. Like Katron Allen is just a really sturdy dude, and even Parker Washington, who's like a slot receiver, is built more like a running back. And I just don't know if Ohio State, I know they played like Braylon Allen earlier in the year, but for a few weeks, I'm not sure they've played the kind of players who are built in a way that when you hit them, you have to really you have to drive those guys into the ground, because they'll just bounce off of arm tackles. But these were guys who were going to bounce off of arm tackles, and it happened on, or not. I mean, arm tackles might be not even the right word. It's just you got to go through that thing. You can't just hit the guy and expect them to go down. That happened on the Tommy play near the goal line, but it also happened on Parker Washington's, what was it, 54-yard touchdown. 54, yeah. That's a zero blitz. Tanner McAllister and J.K. Johnson are right there. You got to tackle him. That's a 6-yard completion if they tackle the tackle receiver where the ball's at, but both guys missed it. And it's like the tackle attempt from J.K. Johnson is just like throwing a shoulder into a guy who's not going to go down by just you throwing a shoulder into him. So it's basically getting back to fundamentals. Like it's not been a prolonged season issue. But I think that style of tackling had a major hand in a few plays getting out for Penn State that otherwise wouldn't have. And that changes the number at the end when you look at the box score.
Well, that's the concern when you haven't played against opponents or athletes who are good enough to make you pay for it. We talked about it all last week. Like, this is a different type of situation and game plan for Ohio State simply because Penn State actually had guys that could make you pay for things if you're not technically good, if you don't do things the way that you're supposed to. And you saw it on that from Parker Washington. You saw it on Sean Clifford, scrambling and coming up to the line of scrimmage. Maybe 3/4 of his body was over the line. Who cares? But on that play, Steele Chambers is covering Theo Johnson, lets him go because he sees Sean Clifford coming up to the line of scrimmage. And then Lathan Ransom sort of stands there and lets him run by him. And then J.K. Johnson stands there and lets him run by him. And it's you may not have that happen if you're playing Rutgers because the guys may not be good enough to even make it work. But when you're playing against good opponents, that's going to happen. And everything from here on out has to be viewed against, like, how would this go against Michigan? How would this go in the playoff? And if you play Michigan the same way, you're going to have the same sort of things. Penn State, I do wonder, one of my overall game notes here was that this was the first time I've seen the secondary have major, just mix-ups and breakdowns in coverage. As a whole, not just like a corner, letting someone go or getting burnt. Not a good day for J.K. Johnson, but that's neither here nor there. And I wonder how much of that was, again, just trying to get up to speed with guys who are the same level of athlete as Ohio State is. And then I wonder how much of it is Mike Yurcich understanding the defense of Jim Knowles a little bit different and finding ways to expose the holes in that defense, because it might be a combination of both.
I think it probably is a combination of both. It's a good point to make about Mike Yurcich because I don't feel like Penn State was really consistently moving the ball. I have one thing that is mildly concerning, and I'll get to it in a little bit. But that one drive that you alluded to, where it was like Steele let the guy go and Ransom was kind of stuck with, and Penn State ran the same play back to back times. The first one was 42 yards down the sideline. And so Ohio State, here's what I don't really know about how Ohio State wants to defend that. And I don't know if Jim Knowles would explain it, but maybe he will if we could talk to him this week. Penn State sent 2 vertical routes through the deep third of the field that J.K. Johnson is responsible for. Yeah. And one guy's down the sideline and one guy breaks in. And my understanding of cover 3 is that when you're that guy, J.K. Johnson, you're supposed to let that in-breaking route go to the safety in the middle of the field and stick on the guy on the outside. And on the first play, he left the guy on the outside. It was 42 yards down the sideline. And then on the next play, same concept, same defense, I think. He cheated a little bit more to the outside, and then the ball went to the guy on the inside and just kind of ran right by Lathan Ransom for a touchdown. So, getting beat by the same concept and the same defense on back-to-back plays, and one of them's a touchdown, is not a tremendously good look. But I think part of that, to your point, might be Mike Yurcich having a little bit of a book on Jim Knowles and spending the entire 2018 season practicing against him every day. So I don't know if conceptually that's a crack in the Ohio State defense, although individually I think J.K. Johnson probably needs to have a little bit better awareness in a situation like that.
Yeah, I mean, I run 4 verticals over and over and over in Madden, so I get it. But, I think in general, the way you beat that is by having pass rushers on the field to get to the quarterback. And there are common denominators, which Austin, I'm sure we'll talk about at some point this week.
I think they could have played more man coverage too.
Yeah. I mean, I think they were pretty clearly wanting to let the Penn State receivers, they didn't want to get beat in the man-on-man situations against guys like Parker Washington. And then you still allow him to work in the middle of the field. And that guy played a hell of a game. I mean, not just the 54-yard touchdown. He had multiple catches inside of the hash marks that were just ridiculous catches on throws that no quarterback should make. And Sean Clifford got bailed out by him on those plays. But on the flip side, secondarily, I thought that Denzel Burke might have played his best game of the year. And it's nice to see him sort of ascending. You really hope for Ohio State's sake that you get Cameron Brown back and healthy. Jordan Hancock played 31 snaps and played fairly well. One thing that kind of stood out to me, and it probably means nothing in the big picture, but the last touchdown drive of the game for Penn State, which I mean, if I was to pick one thing about the way this fourth quarter went, that you're like, God, how do you let that happen? When the game's over and you let them march down the field and score in 5 plays, you're like, come on, like that cannot happen. If
Yeah.
you're talking about Jim Knowles and changing the mentality of this defense, you cannot allow them to just walk out there and march down the field. I know the emotions were high. Everyone was already in celebration mode. It was sort of like Michigan scoring a bunch of touchdowns in 2018 when it's 62-32, and you're like, oh, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
But like, that's just personal pride. And there was one play on that drive where Jordan Hancock sort of just looked like he was not trying to tackle anyone and it was jogging down the field. And I think people are going to be like, oh, did he hurt his hamstring again? Like, having a little Jackson Smith and Jigba flashback or whatever. But he looked like, I'm not interested in this play. And that was a little bit concerning to me as I watched it. But
yeah, I bet that drive out of all the things that happened in the game pisses Jim Knowles off the most. I
hope so. It pisses me off the most, and I have nothing to do with it. Like, I just don't think you just. I just don't think you just give up and surrender points. I just, who cares? They just don't matter. They all matter.
I think that's right. It's about the mindset of the defense, I think, and you want to carry that out through the entirety of the game. Or as long as maybe the starters are in there, and they were in there for the whole thing. A couple of guys played 81 snaps. Maybe that's part of it too. Like guys are gassed a little bit after that playing that many snaps. And I think the party had started too. Mostly is what happened, and there's a lapse of focus there. So the one thing on defense that I think I come away, I don't want to say most concerned because that feels like too big of a stretch at the moment. But you mentioned the Parker Washington catches he had over the middle of the field. A lot of those came on first down, and Jim Knowles is first and foremost focused on stopping the run. They've been really good at that. I thought they were pretty good at it in this game. They allowed fewer than 4 yards a carry. It's a little over 4 when you adjust for sacks, but still it was a fine day of run defense, I thought. But there are times on first down when you watch a defensive line and it's just like the surge to the middle to make sure that you're not going to run for an efficient gain on first down to try to throw you off track. But when you decide you're going to pass in that situation, all you're doing as a defensive line is running to the middle and getting no pressure on the quarterback, and that guy's got all day to throw the ball. And Penn State in this game averaged 13 yards per completion on first down. And on the season, opponents are averaging 12 yards per completion on first down. And maybe that won't matter. Maybe that's just like a number that means nothing. But this was the first time rewatching a game where I thought to myself, like, man, like they're giving up a lot on first down. And I would be a little worried about efficient offenses with a little bit of star power like Penn State has doing that and then starting to get rolling and moving the ball a little bit on this defense.
Yeah, and I think you saw Penn State purposefully trying to put Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg in a situation where they had to defend in the passing game. And that did not go well for Ohio State. There were multiple times when Steele seemed to be chasing people rather than being comfortable just playing in a spot. And that's what they want to do. Those guys want to attack. And that's definitely a concern to me. This is one of those games, Bill, where it's like there's a lot of things where we can talk about it and all of the things that felt good. Again, walking out of Happy Valley with a 13-point win against the number 13 team in the country, that's good. But you have to look at it objectively and wonder, like, we can all agree, I think, that this was probably Tanner McAllister's least efficient game in his time at Ohio State. He did not tackle very well. He was out of place a number of times. But on the flip side, like, he had a play, and this is, if you go back to the end of the first half, it's 3rd and 2 for Penn State. There's 2 minutes to go. It's 14-13 Nittany Lions. They're at approximately midfield. And they brought out that power T for the first time. And Singleton was a fraction of away from breaking it for a 50-yard touchdown run. And McAllister was able to dive and hit him in the legs and took him out, where if he misses that tackle, it's a touchdown. And again, like, there are always the little things where you can go, okay, you did this right here, but the rest of the game, you looked a little out of place. So you just got to figure out how much it really means to the big picture of things and how much of it is just overreacting, how much of it is just saying, well, we haven't played anyone that looks like this, so we don't know how to really adjust to it. That's really the biggest issue for me, like trying to not overreact, but you also can't like ignore it.
No, you can't ignore it. And I think there are like individual things maybe that you want to see them get better at. moving forward. The thing that I try to come back to, especially for the defense, because this is the first time they were really tested. I thought it was a pretty solid performance out of them, and maybe people might look at the total yardage and see the 33 and think like, how could you think that? And I don't think Penn State's the best offense in the world, but they have guys that can hurt you at key positions, as we said all week, and like those guys are going to get theirs too. I thought that the fact that the defense was able to make a bunch of splash plays, got off the field, I think at a good enough clip to put the offense in good position, and that I didn't come away thinking that there was like anything structurally in the defense that could just be exploited over and over again for big gains by opponents, was promising. So like it's kind of the same conversation with me for the offense. Like not every single play is going to be perfect, and if that's what you're expecting, like you're going to be let down all the time. I think you can give up what they gave up in terms of yardage, see a 33 on the board, and come away thinking that was a pretty good day for the defense, even if the yardage and points are much higher than we've seen so far from this defense. I think that just happens when you start to play good teams.
Yeah, I think my biggest my questions are about philosophy really moving forward. Like what is the philosophy on first down for the defense? Because if that's something you're willing to surrender every time, then people are going to do it. Maryland is going to do that. Michigan will throw it to Tyler Schoonmaker over and over and over. Philosophy on offense. Like, are you comfortable just giving the ball to CJ Stroud and saying, go win us this game? And doing that every game until he proves that he can't. That to me is where it comes down to, because we know that this team offensively will go as far as CJ Stroud is, and the passing game is going to take him. That is not a knock on Justin Fry's running game. It's just the way the roster's built. That doesn't mean the running game can't be tough. It doesn't mean the running game shouldn't be better. But for Ohio State to win a national championship, it's going to be about how good CJ Stroud and these receivers are. They're not going to win a game 14-13 in the national championship game. You know what I mean? Like, so go out there.
It'll be pretty boring to watch
and put the ball in the hands of the best player in the team. I thought that what we saw in this game, which is the dichotomy of sports, I guess, we watched Ohio State show that it can be beaten for about 30, 40, 48 minutes or so total. And then we watched 12 minutes where they showed that they can be the best team in the country in the blink of an eye. And that is a unique problem to have, because they're so good when things are going right that at times I think it allows the coaching staff to be a touch complacent, waiting for it to crack. And Ryan Day talked about it last 2 weeks. Just got to crack the stone. Sometimes you wait a little bit too long to really swing your biggest axe. And you put yourself in a position where you might get rolled over by that stone. That's really where I'm wondering. Like, and the hard part of that, and I'm sorry for rambling, is that I don't think you're going to find out anything new about yourself in these next 3 weeks. So there's the opportunity for more complacency to set in because, it looks fixed because you're playing against, Northwestern and Indiana and Maryland. Now, on the flip side of that, Michigan has to play Rutgers and Nebraska in the next 2 weeks. So it's not like they're going to learn a lot more about themselves, but everything now heads to that game. It's all about that game. So how do you prepare for that?
Yeah, I think it's, and this is maybe not the most exciting thing to talk about or write about or ask questions about, but I think the next 3 weeks are like, it's about developing good habits because they can play. They've not played clean games the last 2 weeks, and they still won by comfortable margins. They could play their D game the next 3 weeks and win by 60 against the teams they're going to play. But you don't want to, be playing that way and just have that sort of be your baseline when you go in to play Michigan. Because if you play that game against Michigan, you're going to lose. So I think, to whatever extent you can take these opponents seriously, or maybe it's not even about the opponent. It's just about getting back to, I think what I felt was really solid fundamental play through the course of playing like Wisconsin and Rutgers and Michigan State. Like those aren't good teams either, but you did what you're supposed to do, and you did it in a way that I thought looked like a peak version of Ohio State. The ceiling for this team is that it can win a national championship. I think that's been evident on both sides of the ball. Whatever happened coming out of the bye week, like specifically on offense, I think they just lost a little bit of that and they got to get it back. But this is 3 weeks where you can do that. Like if you can sleepwalk them if you want, and you'll win all 3 of them, no doubt about it. But you can also kind of find those things that you were doing so well prior to the bye week and then build towards something when you get on the field against Michigan.
That's the biggest concern, because Ryan Day's message as Ohio State went into the off week was, we're taking this week to focus on basics, and then basics have been pretty meh since then. So that's where I'm like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you're going into the off week focusing on fundamentals, and then you come out of the off week and fundamentals look anything less than fundamental, then you go, okay, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, but as you said, you got 3 weeks to figure it out. One other thought I have, similar, I guess, in a way to talking about Brian Ferentz's hair a week ago. How much money has the Ohio State secondary made for Penn State receivers in the last 6 years? Like,
Jahan Dotson made a pretty penny. I know that.
I mean, KJ Hamler, Jahan Dotson. Yeah. I mean, these guys have made a boatload off of the Buckeye back seven. So kudos. If I'm Penn State receivers, I just wait for that game and be like, give me the checks, because they are making a ton of money for those guys. It's pretty wild.
They are, yeah. Yeah.
Pretty wild. There wasn't really much in the way of freshmen flashing in this game. Wasn't really any freshman that made any plays other than Jaden Fielding did a nice job, didn't put any out of bounds, and did, Ohio State. That was one area heading into the week where we kind of thought Penn State may have an advantage, is on special teams. Clearly Ohio State missed the field goal. Penn State missed 2 field goals, but neither one of them mattered, I guess. But Jaden Fielding did what he needed to do. Again, we're really getting into the minutia of this as we approach 40 minutes, but it was in the second quarter, Ohio State, after the 3rd and 2, where they let Penn State hit Trey in the backfield. And then they took a delay game on a punt. Like, the first snap from Mason Arnold, the new long snapper replacing Bradley Robinson, was sort of rolled back to Jesse Mirko or in the dirt. And the next one was almost over his head. So that's where you go, okay, this is a wake-up call. In that sort of environment, you could imagine something like that happening. You get a little bit more favorable situation over the next couple of weeks, but the pressure will mount as you head into November 26th. So just a little thing to keep a note on. I thought Ohio State special teams overall played a little bit better this week. I don't know how the officials called lining up over the center on the field goal.
Yeah, I didn't understand that either. It was it Jerron Cage kind of stunted over?
But it was after the play started. So
yeah, I don't understand that.
I don't know the rule, I guess, because that he was certainly not lined up over the center, and they actually did a nice job on TV of showing right at the long snapper, and he was not lined up over him. He moved his leg after the ball. I don't know. It's a pretty dumb rule to me to begin with. Like, why do you have a guy out there that's not allowed to play?
Oh, he has to look between his legs and snap the ball.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't hit him. It wasn't like hitting the center. That's a different thing. Like, they just lined. Yeah. You're just not even allowed to line up in front of him. Why not? Your breath stinks, and he may. Yeah, don't spook me. Your breath is bad. I can't snap. Like, you have halitosis. Now I can't snap. It's weird. Anyway, anything else?
Nope. I think I hit everything that I have here on my notebook.
I've got a lot more notes, but not most of them are individual plays and stuff like that. So I don't want to go too much into it. There was one note. This will be my last one. If Ohio State finds a way to win a national championship this season, the 3rd down and 10 pass with 5 minutes to go in the game from Stroud to Marvin Harrison, that then directly was followed by the seam shot to Emeka Egbuka that put the Buckeyes at the 2-yard line. Like, that is the play of the year for Ohio State, because you're up at that point 30-24. You're all of a sudden faced with 3rd and 10. You give Penn State the ball back there, and the vibe that I had was, if you give Penn State the ball back there, you lose 31-30.
I thought the same thing.
And CJ Stroud goes out and makes an unbelievable throw again to Harrison, where they have such a great chemistry, and then follows it up with a shot to Egbuka, who then the Buckeyes then score 2 plays later on the 7-yard run by Trey Henderson, and that was the end of the game. And there are always those plays you circle in the big picture of the season and say, okay, that's when something clicked. And that play, if you go back and look at it, 5 minutes to go in the game was really it. Now, of course, 45 seconds before that, he threw the ball to Marvin Harrison for a completion where Emeka Ibuka was uncovered and would have scored a 70-yard touchdown on the play. So I do wonder if maybe you get a little bit too comfortable throwing to Marvin when other guys are open, but that's it. We didn't even mention
it's hard.
Cade
They were
Stover.
terrified. They were terrified of Marvin.
Yeah, and that's fair.
Yeah. He his that very first play we talked about way back in the beginning, a 37-yarder on third down. It was press coverage from Kalen King, who's a really good corner. Yeah. Marvin beat him off the line, stacked him, got by him 37 yards, and like he didn't see much press after that.
And King was like holding on for dear life about 15 yards into that route. Like, please don't leave me. We didn't talk about Cade Stover, who had his best day as a pass catcher at Ohio State, maybe his worst day as a blocker at tight end. But then, like, again, much like Tanner McAllister, much like Travion Henderson, where you have that inconsistency at points, he comes back when it was needed and made the biggest block of his life.
Great block.
On the 45 or however many yard touchdown run that was by Travion Henderson. That really changed the game. Like, that was Cade doing everything right. And so you just want to find those plays and build off of them, I guess. And that's what Ohio State has to do for these next 3 weeks.
Yeah, I will say about Cade, I saw a lot of like Cade can't block on the perimeter. I don't like those plays for him. He is essentially stationary while a really fast defensive back is running toward the line of scrimmage at full speed, and Cade has to run to a spot to make sure his angle's right to seal that guy off. Like, it's really hard. Like calling plays like that. That's the things that frustrate me about the offense sometimes. Is like that is needlessly difficult, especially for a guy like Cade Stover. It's not to say that he can't ever execute it. Maybe he can. After the game, he said like I got to do a better job. Like, good for him for owning that. I thought he was not put in good spots, but his block on the Trey run was tremendous. He took 2 guys out of that play.
Yeah, and speaking of good spots, we're going to be in a good spot on Monday at Roosters at 11:30 on Olentangy River Road. Join us if you want. If you don't, that's fine. We're still going to be there. We're going to be breaking down more of this game, looking ahead to Northwestern with Austin, Bobby Carpenter, Justin Zwick, etc. And we got a lot more stuff coming at the podcast this week. For Bill Landis, I'm Jeremy Birmingham. That's the end of the Monday Rewatch Show. Thanks for giving us a listen. Please rate, review, subscribe. Make sure you turn on the notifications so you know when more of these videos come. And as always, thank you very much for being on this ride with us. We'll talk to you later.